Public Engagement Program Manager at the Boston Region MPO. Welcome to the Regional Transportation Advisory Council meeting of April 10th, 2024. Take us through a few quick items here. First, our notice of non-discrimination. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. You can read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.bostonmpo.org/MPO_non_discrimination. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, or if you have any technical difficulties, please contact me, Stella Jordan, via email at sjordan@ctps.org, by phone at 857-702-3675, or via the Zoom chat box. A few guidelines for our meeting today. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. You may mute and unmute yourselves, but please do remain muted unless you're actively speaking. And to participate in the discussion, please select the raised hand function. You can find this by either clicking on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and the window will pop up with the raised hand button at the bottom, or in the reactions button in the toolbar, and the chair will call on you. And if you're joining us by phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. And I'll hand it back over to Len for introductions. Len, you are still muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. And so I'm looking, seems like we have about 14 people here and we don't have a stacked agenda. Why don't we just go around and do some quick intros? Let me pull up the participants list and I'll just call you and you can say what your affiliation is. Just going. Ana Cristina Fregoso.
Hello, Ana Cristina Fregoso. I'm with the Boston Society of Civil Engineers.
Also goes by AC, so
yes.
BAC. Thank you.
I'm changing my name.
Okay. Franny Osmond.
Hi, Franny Osmond. I'm not actually representing anybody right now because I live in Acton, but Acton is represented on the MPO board. So I just come and participate as an individual transportation advocate. Okay. I'm also on the Lowell Regional Transit Authority board. So I always keep that regional transit view in mind.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Franny. Yeah. So Jim Nee. All right, maybe we'll circle back to Jim. John McQueen.
John McQueen, Walk, Massachusetts.
John Strauss.
John Strauss, Town of Burlington.
Thank you, John. Owen McDonald.
Owen McDonald, Town of Weymouth.
Thank you, Owen. Let's see. Skylar Larrabee.
Larrabee, Boston Society of Architects.
See you, Skylar. Yeah, Tyler Tarasi.
Can you all hear me? Tyler Tarasi from the MWRTA.
I can hear you just fine. Thank you. Jim Nee.
Hi, Jim Nee, administrator with the MWRTA.
Thank you, Jim. So I'm going to go backwards through my list and include staff this time. So, Sean Rourke.
Oh, I'm here. Sorry, wasn't prepared to speak.
Okay. right, thank you, Sean. Gina Perilli?
It's Peril, thanks. Hi, Len. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of the MPO. Good afternoon,
Th-
everyone.
Thank you. I should know that by now. Sorry. I almost said that the first time and then did not go with my gut. Sorry about that, and Zuleika Murthy?
Hi, I'm Zuleika Murthy, manager of the Unified Planning Work Program.
Thanks, Zuleika. Ethan LaPointe?
Afternoon, everybody. Ethan LaPointe, Boston Region MPO, Transportation Improvement Program Manager.
Thank you, Ethan. And somehow I've gotten his name associated with Ian. So if I say Ian at some point in time, I'm talking about Ethan, so just correct me, Ethan, and I think the last person is Stella, and we just heard from Stella, but Stella will tell us who she is again.
Yep. Hey, everyone. I am the Public Engagement Program Manager, and I believe we have Tegan here as well today.
Oh, cool. Tegan has her hand up. Hi, Tegan.
Sorry, Len, I just raised my hand because I just joined. I'm sorry, I was a couple minutes late, but I'm Tegan
That's
Tyke.
it.
I'm the Executive Director of the MPO staff.
Great. Thank you, Tegan. And I'm Leonard Diggins, and I'm here representing the MBTA Rider Oversight Committee. And now I'm going to turn it back to Stella to take us through our first topic, which is the MOU update, and our updated. We're going to discuss the update for our role on the MPO and through as verbalized in the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding. So thank you, Stella.
Glenn, did we want to pause to see if there were any public comments real quick?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Got ahead of myself, and I didn't do the minutes. So any public comments?
Yeah, I'll sit on that.
Yeah. Just raise your hand electronically if you do. Okay. Not seeing any, but of course you can always raise your hand when we're discussing things if you want to chime in on that topic. And so next approval of the January minutes. I get a motion to approve in a second? And then we'll discuss whether there are any corrections that we need before voting.
I move to approve.
Thank you, John. John McQueen moves to approve. I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, AC. So any comments, questions, corrections? All right, I don't see any. So on a motion to approve the minutes by John McQueen and a second by Ana Cristina Rosa. Stella, please take us to the roll.
Yeah. Len Diggins,
Yes.
Franny Osmond, Franny, are you still there and able to unmute?
I am here. I'm dealing with an angry and deluded 99-year-old father right this second.
Sorry.
In the background, so I got distracted. So can you
understand.
repeat the question to me? I just walked outside.
Sure. We're just approving the minutes, Franny.
Oh, okay. Okay, yes, I approve the minutes. I
Okay,
apologize.
thanks. Oh, no problem. I'm still hanging there. Yeah.
I am. I'm just handling it. Okay.
Yeah, that's hard. It's definitely hard. All right, take care. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Franny. John McQueen.
Approve.
All right, Skylar Larrabee. Skylar, are you able to unmute?
You want me?
I didn't quite catch that.
We're asking for your vote to approve the minutes, Skylar? You can approve, not approve, or abstain.
Approve.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Ana Cristina Fregoso
Aye.
and Owen McDonald.
Yes.
Was that a yes?
Yes.
Yeah, it was a good.
Great, thank you. Didn't quite hear it. All right, Great, thank you all. That
Okay.
motion carries.
Great. And now, Stella, it's you. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to rereading what you sent, because I really liked it the first time. I think I'm gonna like it as much, not to lead my colleagues being as to how they should respond to this. So anyway, so Stella, take it away.
Thanks, Len. Yeah, so just before we dive into the conversation about some draft language for the MOU update, that's again the MPO's governance document, which is undergoing an update this year. I'll just provide a brief refresher on our conversation at the March meeting. So first, also just a refresher on some of the parameters around the update that we were asked to consider. These parameters came from recommendations in our last federal certification review and were written up in a memo by the MOU ad hoc committee, which was posted to the calendar for today's meeting as well. But basically, the main points there were to clarify the role and mission of the Advisory Council, outline the relationship between the Advisory Council and the MPO board, staff, and engagement activities, to clearly define goals for the Advisory Council, and to keep it at a sort of high level, so not really dig into specific mechanisms for how the Advisory Council functions. And so at our last meeting in March, we talked about what some other MPOs, Advisory Councils, are doing and what they look like. And we talked about some priorities and goals that we would want to think about for our own Advisory Council. So just to refresh on some of the key themes that came up in that discussion, our conversation really centered around membership and ensuring that we have really robust membership on this Advisory Council, education, so providing sort of a space where people can be educated about the transportation planning process and make sure that folks have the education they need in order to fully engage with that process. The importance of this Advisory Council seat on the MPO board and voice in those conversations. And we talked through the relationship between the Advisory Council and staff, and sort of the way that staff can really ensure that we are, proactively creating space to make connections to the development of programs and projects at the MPO in a timely way, in a way that, your feedback can really be fully incorporated, and sort of having a really strong advisory role there. So those were the key themes that I really took into consideration creating this draft, and feel free to jump in the discussion in a little bit if you think I missed anything from our conversation there. One other area that we talked about as well with our review of peer agencies, Advisory Councils, was sort of the commonalities between some of the challenges that other MPOs, Advisory Councils faced, and also some of the goal areas that they had outlined. So I essentially used this feedback and drew from that peer research and the parameters that I just mentioned to draft some language that I think sort of covers all of these areas that we talked about and really hits the key themes that came up in previous discussions and your recommendations. And with that, I encourage you all to pull up the draft language that's posted to the MPO calendar for today's meeting. I believe Gia just dropped the link in the chat as well. Thank you for that. And I am also going to just share my screen real quick for sort of another view on this. Give me one moment. All right. Can everyone see that okay? Okay. So this
No.
is sort of this is just a different view of the same document, the same language that was posted on the calendar, but I essentially put together some highlights here to sort of mark up this language in a way that enables us to tie in some of those areas that I just took us through. So the parameters, the feedback from our last conversation in March, and some other considerations. So just to walk through this real quick, the green highlight here is language that corresponds to the update parameters. So in the first paragraph here, this language describes the Advisory Council's role and mission, which were key areas that we needed to cover in the update. Defining goals was also another thing that was in the parameters. So this whole section also relates there, but I also highlighted these according to how they relate to feedback that you all provided during the March meeting as well, which is indicated by the blue highlight. So you'll see here membership, education and engagement, the relationship to staff. Those were all key things that we discussed at the last meeting. And then there's also a longer description of the relationship with staff and sort of how staff can create connections to the work that the Advisory Council can impact here at the bottom in the paragraph below the goals. And the first part of that paragraph, I think, is a more functional description of the relationship with staff, which again also goes back to the parameters there. There's a lot of overlap here, but I tried to just color code it to provide, you know, maybe another easier way to think about this. And then finally, the pink highlight indicates areas that, you know, after considering all of these things, the parameters, the existing MOU language, the peer research that we've talked about, and all of our previous discussions here in this forum, as well as conversations that I've had with Len and Franny, the chair and vice chair. These are sort of areas that we as staff really wanted to elevate as well as elements that we think really also address and advance public engagement program priorities as well as and alongside Advisory Council priorities. So these are things that I think will really help frame and guide the continued staff support for and collaboration with the Advisory Council going forward. Again, I think there's other ways I probably could have parsed this. There's a lot of overlap between all of these things, but just wanted to provide another way to think about it here. And I can always come back to this document and screen share, but I'll go back to the slideshow now for a minute because I have just a couple of discussion questions as well. So after looking at the draft language, and again, you can pull that up on your own as well, or I can always go back to that highlighted version, but just wanting to see if folks have any suggested changes, if you think that there's any key goals or anything that we discussed previously that's missing from here. Any other thoughts that you want to bring up?
Raise your hand, electron. Yeah, John McQueen.
Yeah, thank you. I think that on those three goals that there should be more of a emphatic emphasis on guidance perspectives that we're to provide. We're not just sponges to take in information. I think we've been expected, at least in the past, to help guide some of the recommendations and such. So I think I'd see that as key input.
Yeah, thank you, John. And apologies if that didn't come across clearly enough. I agree. I think that should definitely be a key focus. And I think definitely something I tried to bring in, especially under the accountability goal. And sort of in the last sentence of the first paragraph as well, sort of really providing input and guidance on the development of MPO programs. But I can definitely see if I can pull that out a little bit more.
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but please go, John. I was just gonna comment on what she had said, so but I thought you were done, so please go.
Yeah, I think it deserves enough importance to be added as a bullet, as a fourth. So,
Okay, I hear you. So I was gonna say I saw it as being included in accountability, but your argument certainly has good merit. And more strong merit. So well, all right. And anyone else? Anything else?
I don't seem to be able to find the raise hand.
Okay, don't worry. So then
Function, but-
you just talk whenever you want. But
Well, this is interesting to me because after the last meeting, I actually started writing a resignation letter. And a lot of what I was thinking about was that we are an advisory committee, but we don't get to advise that much. I think there is a lot of action, activity, or whatever you want to call it, in the Boston area. In particular, things about, well, I've been frustrated for some time about the fact that we don't really have much to say about the reconstruction of the pike through what was the railroad yards, through the throat. And I think that the plan that's, I believe, going to be executed is actually a very bad plan. I wish we'd had more chance to say something about it. There's also a lot of commentary that I think we should be making about the MBTA and how the money is being spent. There's an interesting article in today's Globe. I also am pretty frustrated that we don't meet in person anymore. I think there's a great deal that's lost by continuing to be Zooming all the time. That's probably enough for me to say,
well, thank you for that, and feel free to include more. In your letter, whether you choose to resign or not. I'm always interested in your input, and especially if you decide not to. I'm even more interested in your input along those lines. Just to say to the in person, towards the end of this meeting, I am going to ask if people want to do a hybrid meeting. I don't see us doing only in person meetings anymore. And I think the hybrid component allows more people to participate in it. So we can do some hybrids. It'll really depend on the capacity of staff. But yeah, there are trade-offs just about anything we do. But yeah. But I'm listening to your input. I just only added the thing about the hybrid part because that will be part of discussion. The rest of it, I just take as input. If you want feedback on it, I can do feedback later on, but I don't want to get caught up in that now when the point is to get input and feedback on the draft language. So anyone else, comments, questions, concerns about the draft language? Well, what I'll suggest that people do, and you can certainly send me any feedback you have before the next MOU update committee meeting. Is compare this to the current language. And Stella provided the document that has the current MOU language. And see how you feel about that comparison. And see if that maybe sparks some more thoughts on your part as to what should be in here, whether it's missing from the other document or whether it's just something completely new that you want us to consider doing as advisory committee. Okay. And we're gonna move on, and if something comes to you later on during the meeting, we can circle back. Like I said, this is not one of those packed meetings where I just gotta really kind of barrel forward. So going to move on now, but before I go to the next topic, I want to circle back to introductions because I missed a couple of people. Yeah. Yes, Franny? All right. Maybe that's just an inadvertent.
Looks like she
Unmuted.
may have lost connection.
Okay.
See if she comes back.
All right. Well, in the meantime, I want to circle back to a couple of people missed an introduction. So, Gia?
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Gia. I'm the Public Engagement Coordinator at the Boston Region MPO.
Thank you, Gia. And Annette Dempster.
Hi, everyone. Annette Dempster, the Director of Policy and Planning at CTPS Boston Region MPO staff.
Thank you, Annette. So, any sense that Franny's back yet?
Not seeing her.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll move forward. And so next on the agenda is the discussion of the TIP, the final programming scenario, which we did last Thursday. It was a really good meeting. Ethan?
Yeah, thank you, Lennon. As I introduced myself earlier, afternoon, everybody. I'm Ethan Lapointe. I work as the TIP manager with the Boston Region MPO. If you can go on to the next slide. Today's presentation has a variety of components to it that I will try to go through because there was a lot of work done to summarize each of the different components that is feeding into this year's federal fiscal year 2025 to 29 Transportation Improvement Program. My presentation today will start off with just some resources for staff to, for members to reference throughout this presentation, including the scenario itself, a lot of the different factors that determined the kinds and types of projects that the MPO board voted to fund in the Transportation Improvement Program, and then summarize what exactly those projects are and what they do at a very high level. I'll then kind of go into detail on specific projects, starting with the MPO's Community Connections Program, then the projects funded within the Project Design Pilot in federal fiscal year 2025, and to 2 Long-Range Transportation Plan or LRTP projects funded for partial design funding, I should add, in federal fiscal year 2026. And then capping it off with some new construction projects within the roadway, trails, and then also transit categories, specifically speaking about the core investment programs of complete streets, bike ped, intersection improvements, and then the inaugural year of a formal application cycle for transit transformation. Then I'll just go through some next steps as far as where upcoming meeting dates are at and have some time for discussion. So if we can move on to the next slide, and then the one after that, as part of today's presentation, staff have compiled the final TIP programming scenario, which is basically a fancy way of saying what the TIP looks like in terms of what projects are currently funded across the 5 years within the regionally prioritized component of the Transportation Improvement Program, with regional prioritization referring to the projects that are funded using the MPO's dollars for selection. This list does not include all projects, as it does not include, for example, the projects that the MBTA has or the MassDOT statewide highway programs. Anybody that is interested in those projects should attend tomorrow's MPO board meeting at 10 a.m., where MassDOT and the MBTA will be discussing those. But as far as my presentation here today, this list covers everything I will be talking about. So if we can go on to the next slide and discuss how we reached a final scenario and what many of the different factors that were feeding this scenario are. The final scenario used to be called scenario number 5, implying that there were a variety of other stages of scenario development before that. The first initial scenario, which we referred to as the baseline or scenario 1, is based on the TIP readiness days. Now, at the last meeting of the Regional Transportation Advisory Council on March 13th, I gave a presentation that briefly summarized a lot of the outcomes of that TIP readiness days discussion. Many of those items and recommendations that MassDOT made at the TIP readiness days really informed the development of this programming scenario. One of the widespread challenges that was witnessed at Tip Readiness Days on February 15th, and that I conveyed at the last meeting, was that there was a widespread series of project delays and cost increases, as many projects that are currently programmed and still programmed on this tip have not indicated a large amount of progress in advancing their designs, often due to cost constraints. And then, because design has not been progressing, cost estimates have been out of date when revised estimates come in. In many cases, many of the projects that were recommended for delay had been on the tip or initially programmed on the tip several tip cycles prior. What this led to was the majority of projects in federal fiscal years 2025 and 26 being delayed out of those years, leading to surpluses in the first 2 years of the tip. And because those projects were pushed out, deficits in federal fiscal year 2027 and 2028, where most of them ended up. Given that those deficits were present, there was also uncertainty on how the funding availability in federal fiscal year 2029 could be allocated. So in summary, the outcomes were three primary guiding questions. One, how should surpluses in the near-term years be utilized to fund any new projects or cover cost increases? How should deficits be reduced in order to achieve fiscal constraint or get them zeroed out in order to make sure that projects can stay on track, and where should that money come from? And then, on the note of where that money comes from, to what extent would the funding in federal fiscal year 2029 for regional prioritization be used to support those deficits? And would supporting and covering those deficits in federal fiscal year 27 and 8 reduce funding to the point where no new projects could be funded in that year? If we go on to the next slide, we can go into some detail on many of the other meetings that Len alluded to earlier that were that took place to really formulate this strategy. The MPO board and the TIP Process Readiness and Engagement Committee, or TIPR committee, met a total of 4 times throughout March and into early April to propose and develop this programming scenario. The primary focus that really trumped many of the others was on the resolution of the deficit in federal fiscal year 2027, as it represented, financially speaking, the most difficult measure to overcome in scenario development. And if fiscal constraint, or making sure that the sources of funding and uses of funding equal one another, is not attained in the TIP, then the other years of the TIP cannot be adopted in kind. The focus on the resolution in federal fiscal year 2027 was namely looking at whether or not projects should be deprogrammed from federal fiscal year 2027, meaning removed from the TIP entirely, or delayed out of those years to a later point, namely federal fiscal year 2029. The decision that the committee and eventually the MPO board voted upon was to move a behind schedule project initially in federal fiscal year 2026 out to federal fiscal year 2029 to make that gap coverage. To go into specific detail on what this scenario was that is now the final scenario on the next slide, this specific project was the Woburn Town Common project, which was a $17.38 million project, originally programmed in federal fiscal year 2026, and had been programmed all the way back in federal fiscal year 2021 to 25 TIP, in the last fiscal 25 of that TIP cycle. So it had been on the TIP for quite some time, yet it was still not at 25% design when the board made the vote to move this project back, and the project is not likely to be at 25% design, at least for a few months. Ergo, it is now in federal fiscal year 2029. The cost has also, in tandem, because design has not progressed significantly since that time, been revised further. So there is always the possibility that the cost may increase on the project once that 25% design threshold is attained, as was witnessed across many of the projects in this most recent TIP cycle. If we go on to the next slide, one of the main questions was, with the project in Woburn selected, whether or not that project should be funded in full in federal fiscal year 2029 or partially funded. This goes back to that previous question that I raised, where if a project were to be accommodated in that delay to fiscal 29, that may only provide insufficient, or I should say, that would leave insufficient funding to allow for any new projects. In recognition of some prevailing trends across multiple TIP cycles in which there were repeated record lows of project applications for construction funding, with a new low in this TIP cycle of 3 projects applying for construction funding and 1 fill-in project coming in a little bit after in February, down from about 9 projects last year, there's the need to balance that low application volume with the fiscal constraint in federal fiscal year 2029. And the solution that the board voted upon was to partially fund Woburn Common in federal fiscal year 2029 rather than in full, to allow for 3 new projects to be partially funded in federal fiscal year 2029 as well. When I say partially funded, the projects will be fully funded in a future TIP cycle, but they were funding allocation will be spread across federal fiscal year 29 and 2030 in next year's TIP cycle. So their needs and commitments will be made in full eventually, but just at this time, the funding spread is anticipated to be made across multiple years. If we can go on to the next slide, just to front load kind of that most important factor of the scenario, let's talk more at a high level on what this scenario did, because it wasn't just federal fiscal year 2027. The proposed federal fiscal years 25 to 29 TIP funds 70 projects in total in the regional prioritization program within those 5 federal fiscal years. Of those 70 projects, 32 of them are new projects. Now, of those 32 projects, many of them are in smaller buckets of funding of the about $730 million that is being programmed here. That includes 10 projects within Community Connections and 8 in the Transit Transformation Investment Program. There's also 8 design projects in federal fiscal years 25 and 26, and 6 total roadway and trail projects that are new to this TIP. It's worth noting that earlier I mentioned that staff received applications for 3 construction projects. There was an additional 4th that came in, and then a further 2 that were formally in MassDOT's statewide highway program in federal fiscal year 25 were incorporated into the MPO's regional target program. So those projects have just had a change in funding source. They are not necessarily new to the TIP. They've been on the TIP in the statewide highway program, but the MPO is now regionally prioritizing that. If we can move on to the next slide, just to kind of list, again, those were the new projects, how those projects compare to the overall list of projects contained within the TIP. Again, there's about $730 million worth of projects total across those 70 projects, including a small amount of about $4.8 million of unprogrammed funding. The largest proportion of projects in terms of investment program in the TIP is in complete streets at about 21 projects. That then falls to 16 projects for the Community Connections program at about $5.1 million. So again, a fairly sizable number of projects there, despite having a fairly or relatively low funding amount. Bicycle Network and Pedestrian Connections has 10 projects at around $70 million. And then Transit Transformation, which had its first official year of solicitation for new projects, had 11 projects at about $55.5 million. There's then intersection improvements at 8 projects for $47.2 approximately dollars. And then, of course, there are 4 major infrastructure projects here, but the bulk of the funding, that $171.9 million, is going to 2 of them, Rutherford Avenue in Charlestown in Boston, and then McGrath Highway in Somerville. The other 2 projects are ones that I'll get to later, as they are design projects. So, and then to kind of use this graphically to show a little bit better how these investment programs balance against one another, these investment programs on the next slide are determined by the MPO's long-range transportation plan in an effort to address some of the goals and objectives that the MPO has set. And this graph on screen here illustrates the proportion of expenditure by investment program using the regional prioritized funding that the MPO has. Generally speaking, as I'll illustrate on the next slide, each of these investment programs are largely performing closely towards where the targets are set by the LRTP, with the blue bar on screen illustrating the LRTP or long-range plan goal area, and the orange bar illustrating the actual investment allocation made within this TIP cycle. So just to kind of go over the high-level marks here that this graph shows, the Complete Streets program has a slightly higher amount of funding than the LRTP target and is largely in line with where it should be. Major infrastructure is slightly lower, but as has been mentioned in previous TIP cycles, that is due in part to the fact that the definition of major infrastructure has recently changed and no longer utilizes as much of a cost threshold to define which projects are and are not major infrastructure. There are many large-scale projects in the Complete Streets investment program, such as the Western Avenue project on Route 107 in Lynn, that have a funding level that would be typically more akin to a major infrastructure project. And vice versa, many projects in major infrastructure could be construed as a Complete Streets project, like Rutherford Avenue. The other area that is a fair bit lower than the target is the intersection improvements category, which is a target of around 12% of allocation, but is really around about 6 to 7% of real funding in the TIP. The reason being, again, that many projects that would typically be a targeted intersection improvements project tend to expand in scope into a complete streets funding category. There is, however, a large amount of funding allocated in this TIP cycle to the Bicycle Network and Pedestrian Connections program relative to its LRTP target of 5%, with 9% allocated versus that 5%. And similarly with transit transformation, given a long-standing track record of utilizing regional transit authority projects to fund surpluses in near-term years of the TIP, when no other projects could be accelerated, there's about 11% allocation to new transit projects versus the 5% set aside or recommended by the long-range plan. I should also just note as a caveat that the long-range plan also does not program or allocate any recommended level of funding that should remain unprogrammed for contingency, so the targets will likely never be fully attained so long as there is any contingency funding in the TIP. Just a disclaimer. So moving on to the next slide to start going into a little bit more detail on actual specific projects here. So on the next slide, we can start off with the Community Connections Program. Given the funding surpluses within federal fiscal year 2025, staff recommended and the MPO board voted to fund all 10 projects that applied for funding within the MPO's Community Connections Program, which are listed alphabetically on screen here. There are 3 bicycle racks projects in total on this list, including 123 bicycle racks in Arlington for $90,878, 1,600 bicycle racks within the city of Boston for $380,000 approximately, and about $23,000 to the town of Scituate to procure 25 bicycle racks. The other new element as far as formal solicitations for projects, in addition to transit transformation this year, was a new bike share support program that launched. The purpose of the bike share support program not only being to provide a dedicated source of funding to expand the regional bike share system, like Blue Bikes in the inner core, but potentially other systems in the future, but also to provide a source of funds to maintain that system and replace existing stations as Blue Bikes reaches its 10th year. There were 4 projects here, the first being applied for by the city of Boston, about $590,000 for 12 stations, 3 stations and some new bicycles within Brookline for $200,000, and 8 stations and 65 bicycles in Cambridge, for about $385,000. And then lastly, but not least, was the city of Somerville requesting 13 stations for about $280,000 there. Then we also received an application for 1 microtransit pilot project, which is a joint application for the use of an on-demand microtransit project using electric vehicles by the cities of Chelsea and Revere, with $500,000 in its first year of funding in federal fiscal year 2025. But given microtransit projects are typically funded on a rolling 3-year basis with reapprovals each year, there are expected to be additional commitments made in federal fiscal year 26 and 7. There was also the first time that a municipality applied for a bicycle lanes project within the Community Connections Program by the city of Malden for $81,250, and 1 Blue Bikes expansion project by the city of Revere for 4 stations and 40 pedal bicycles located near to the Northern Strand Trailhead at North Marshalls and Salem Streets, and also Griswold Park in Northern Revere. So with that, those are the 10 projects that were applied for the Community Connections Program, and all of those were funded in this scenario. For a little bit of an inverse case of that, though, on the next slide is the project design pilot in federal fiscal year 2025, which I'll start off with some background on. So this slide here shows the list of all of the projects, minus 1 that applied for the MPO's project design pilot in federal fiscal year 2025. The project that is not listed here was a project in Cambridge that actually received a federal discretionary grant for its design funding, hence why it is no longer listed, as it already identified a separate funding resource. So given that project application volume that I alluded to earlier, numbers, the MPO board voted in the federal fiscal years 2024 to 28 TIP cycle to carve out about $4 million for project design funding. When the readiness days outcomes became apparent within the more recent MPO meetings that happened in March, there was naturally an identification that there was additional funding resources available to support even more design projects than that $4 million would have allowed. In recognition of the fact that the majority of applications the MPO received this year, as represented by the about $17.4 million worth of applications, far outweighed the resources initially programmed. However, in recent weeks, MPO staff have had some coordination with MassDOT that indicated that even with the surplus funding, other constraints, namely in terms of staffing and logistics, were present that would not allow for most of those project applications to be fulfilled. Given that this is a project design pilot, there was the need to make sure that this pilot program can be deliverable in the sense that these projects will actually execute and move forward with their design, and manageable to make sure that as these projects move forward, any challenges or changes that come up can be accommodated. In recent discussions that have been had with RTAC and also the TIP Process Readiness and Engagement Committee meeting, there was a discussion around the microtransit pilot program that the MPO offers, illustrating how some of the experiences that have been had in funding many projects in a pilot program by the MPO can make it difficult to manage those projects if there's staff turnover at the local MPO or state level in terms of really navigating and ensuring that those projects and pilots can be successful. Given those pilots for microtransit operate on 3 years, many design projects have an even longer design life cycle than those 3 years. Given a longer design timeline, that can further complicate the kinds of staff constraints that can emerge and create risks to the success of these design projects. Therefore, that smaller pool of design funding or a smaller pool of design projects being more manageable is critical to making sure that the success of this pilot could potentially create a more long-term opportunity to provide design funding to municipalities and improve that project pipeline. So among these 14 projects listed on screen, the MPO voted to support 6 of these projects, as indicated on the next slide. The 6 projects that are selected represent the 2 highest scoring projects within the Complete Streets and the Bicycle Network and Pedestrian Connections programs, in addition to 2 joint projects that applied together for the Intersection Improvements Program. In alphabetical order, the first one is the Complete Streets Design Project in Arlington for a Complete Streets project on Broadway, spanning from Alewife Brook Parkway to Massachusetts Avenue, to provide safe biking facilities and also some transit improvements in an area that the town recently designated as a Section 3A MBTA community zoning district. In similar fashion, while there isn't officially an adopted district yet, there is also a transit supportive trails project by the city of Framingham to design the second phase of their Chris Walsh Trail, for which the city has already received an earmark for the phase 1, which creates a connection between the Farm Pond Park through a former Massachusetts Water Resources aqueduct into the Framingham commuter rail and MWRTA bus hub facility located at that commuter rail station. There's existing mixed use and multifamily development in the project area, with the possibility for further connectivity between this proposed trail connection into the station and other future developments. Sherburne were those 2 municipalities in the intersection improvements program I alluded to earlier, with Holliston requesting $250,000 to make a targeted intersection improvement for a signal installation at Route 16 and Whitney Street. Sherburne sought some funding, about $900,000 to reconstruct with Complete Streets improvements the Route 27 and Route 16 area in their community, which has multiple intersections, including a grade crossing that prevent a large amount of safety concerns for such a small community with a high amount of traffic. One of the other factors linking these communities is not only the road that they share in the form of Route 16, but also the fact that both of these communities have not had a project on the regionally prioritized program of the TIP in over 15 years at the time of their application, with both having projects before 2008. That is because 2008 is the earliest year that my records go back to track. To move on to some of the other projects, though, there was also a project for Complete Streets on the reconstruction of Granger Boulevard in Marlborough, located near Marlborough's affordable housing developments and multiple planned, existing, and underway mixed-use reconstructions, along with supportive elements for transit services provided by the Metro West Regional Transit Authority. For another joint application project, there was a movement by the towns of Norfolk, Wrentham, and Walpole, Norfolk having not had a project since 2009 on the TIP, to design the Metacomet Greenway in their communities, which would sort of represent a sort of backbone route from which further further multimodal accommodations and investments could be made, as there are currently not many off-road or on-road bicycle paths in either of those communities. It should also be noted that while these are tentative plans, these communities may also be looking to make sure that some of their mixed use or family zoning districts may be potentially located next to these project limits to allow for that sort of accessible non-single occupancy vehicle development and usage of the trail system. So earlier I mentioned on the next slide that there were 2 projects listed in the major infrastructure program that were not there for construction. In recognition of the fact that there was sufficient surplus funding in federal fiscal years 2025 and 26, but also some interest expressed from not only board members, but project proponents in advancing large-scale projects for design through the MPO's investment programs, staff recommended and the board voted to adopt funding for 2 projects that are listed on the MPO's long-range transportation plan, or Destination 2050, that are the only 2 projects on that list that currently do not have a design funding resource identified for them. These being the Route 4225 interchange project in the town of Lexington to approach 25% design there for some preliminary work, and about $1.4 million for Framingham's Route 126 and 135 grade crossing elimination project, again for preliminary design work and public engagement to update a concept that is about a decade old. These are a fill-in project. These projects did not formally apply and therefore were not scored in last year's TIP cycle, but have been programmed in federal fiscal year 2026 so that the project proponents may use the coming months to begin initial engagement and outreach with various stakeholders in the project area, and also to have them reapply and be formally scored in the development of the federal fiscal years 2026 to 30 TIP. In similar fashion, on the note of developing certain large-scale projects, just to move into the construction projects on the next slide, there are also multiple projects here, some in the construction for roadways and trails, but the majority of them being for the transit program. This first project was one of the ones that applied formally this past fall, which is in Quincy for intersection improvements at Willard Street and Rich Udy Drive, which is an intersection signalization and shared path installation project near to Quincy Quarries, about $1.8 million in federal fiscal year 2026. The next project is one of the new projects that, given the scenario adopted by the board on this next slide, is being partially funded across 2 federal fiscal years. This is a returning project that had unsuccessfully applied to last year's TIP cycle, which is Bellingham's roadway rehabilitation of Route 126 from the 495 ramps, about 800 feet north of those ramps, to the Medway town line. Since that project had applied last year, the proponent has demonstrated progress not only towards achieving 25% design, but has also upgraded the proposed facilities from bilateral bike lanes to a full 11-foot shared use path, along with additional improvements to widening culverts to convert some culverts into full-scale bridges in order to mitigate riverine flood concerns. This project is being funded with about $8.34 million in federal fiscal year 2029, with the remaining $8.34 million expected to be funded in federal fiscal year 2030. In similar fashion, the next project, also a new project that had applied to last year's TIP and is now recommended for programming this year, is the Argilla Road Ecological Title Restoration Project in Ipswich. This project is funded for $3 million in federal fiscal year 2029, with $2.37 million to be funded in 2030. And its primary focus, given the adoption of the new long-range transportation plan, its focus area on climate resiliency, is climate resiliency. This project is further elevating the roadway above what was proposed last year to about 9 feet above sea level rise to mitigate concerns around flood conditions expected to be witnessed in 2100. The roadway currently floods around 16 times a year due to sunny day flood conditions, not including any elements associated with storm surge. And the project will not only widen existing culverts and remove old weir infrastructure that are inhibiting the flow of the marsh water through this culvert, but also add new ones, elevate the roadway, bolster and reinforce the embankments along the roadway to mitigate erosion, and also incorporating natural plantings to support that effort, and also critically to incorporate safety improvements at the intersections leading into the Crane Beach and the Crane Estate at the driveways located there. The next project is the 4th and final roadway and trail project listed on the TIP for this year, again in federal fiscal year 2029. This is the bike path construction of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail from the Sudbury Diamond Railroad crossing to Eaton Road West. The figure here for the request is actually a little bit off. It should be around 8 million. I did not update that, but it is, just as with the previous project, funded with 50% of funding, about 4.26 million in federal fiscal year 29, and the remaining 4.26 million expected to be funded in federal fiscal year 2030. This project is a little bit more advanced in its design than the other projects mentioned, with 25% design expected to be attained in June 2024. Given that there was no funding available to support this project in fiscal year 27 and 8, it is programmed to 2029 as that was where there was funding availability. Moreover, with this project funded in the MPO's investment programs, that created an opportunity, I should say, within the MassDOT State Highway Program to move forward the next following segment in the city of Framingham, southward of that Eden Road terminus for this phase. Then moving on to the next slide for the last batch of projects being the Regional Transit Authority projects within the Transit Transformation Program. Given surpluses of funding in recent prior TIP cycles have largely been filled by projects provided by the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority that were consistent with the MPO's goals and values, but not formally scored, staff actively engage Regional Transit Authority partners early in this TIP cycle to provide them with an early opportunity to apply for projects within the Transit Transformation Program. One project being the Metro West Regional Transit Authority's application for 3 29-foot compressed natural gas buses, which is the first phase of expansion for conversion to a full-size bus fleet, was initially applied for during last fall, with the other 4 projects being fare upgrades for the Cape Ann Transportation Authority, Gloucester Facility Modernization for that authority, and also a vehicle replacement project coming in as fill-ins. Metro West Regional Transit Authority also requested funding, which was programmed between federal fiscal years 25 and 6. And I just noticed that I have not updated that slide because the total column is incorrect. It should be 2.5 million for that project to redesign their Blandon bus hub to improve not only their operating facilities and the system, or I should say the accessibility of that facility for their staff, but also provide a weather enclosed waiting area. This is a design project for that future improvement, but will also improve the competitiveness for any potential future discretionary grant applications there. Between these 5 projects for the regional transit authorities, this amounts to about $8.3 million of allocation to projects in these agencies and entities, which is something that has not been done in previous or more recent TIP cycles and was one of the objectives identified by the MPO board for the Transit Transformation Program. In addition to this funding on the next slide, there's also 3 new projects that were provided by the MBTA across the system. This first one being an accessibility improvements project, about $5 million to the Central Station elevator project on the MBTA Red Line to construct 2 redundant elevators and modernize an existing highly unreliable outbound elevator at that Red Line facility. This is a partial contribution by the MPO to the project, as the remainder is being supported by the MBTA. On the next slide, we also have, of similar cost at $5 million, a bus circulation improvement for consistency with and support of the MBTA's bus network redesign, which is a circulation and operational improvement at Nubian Station in the city of Boston for accessible passenger platforms and to improve service efficiencies and reduce wait time and also improve safety for users of that facility. And last but not least, for new MBTA projects was also a pedal and park modernization project for upgrades to 15 MBTA pedal and park bicycle storage facilities across the system, which is about 12 to 13 transit stations across 9 municipalities. I will not go through those 9 municipalities here, but on that project scenario spreadsheet I mentioned earlier, each of those stations and communities is listed out in full there. To give a general idea, these pedal and park stations span about as south as Braintree and Route 128 and go as far north in this proposal to Salem Station on the commuter rail there. So to move on to some next steps, again, those are the specific projects that are new to the TIP this year. And on the next slide, the public comment period for the federal fiscal years 2025 to 29 TIP, where you can provide feedback on these projects, the existing projects, prevailing trends on the TIP, or other relevant items, will begin on April 22nd and last until May 22nd, which is a 30-day public comment period above that minimum 21-day requirement in order to provide more space for feedback and also the potential for some in-person engagement opportunities surrounding the draft TIP as well. We're expecting that the federal fiscal years 25 to 29 TIP will take place, or I should say its endorsement would take place at the June 6th MPO board meeting, with it taking effect on October 1st, 2024. And on the next slide, while we are looking to wrap up this TIP cycle, one of the important factors to mention is that given many of the challenges witnessed during this year's TIP development cycle, a lot of questions raised, and some of the prevailing trends that have emerged throughout multiple tip cycles, staff are going to continue to engage members of the public, also members of not only the MPO board, RTAC, and the tip process readiness and engagement committee to really try to address and discuss some of these prevailing issues and concerns that folks may have there. We're also hoping to use this new form of the tip committee for more detailed discussion and also strategy development to really support that effort towards transparency around the tip process. And we're really hoping this summer, namely, to use the time in June and also the later months to reflect on this past tip cycle and employ measures to prevent the similar issues from arising that we've seen not only in this tip cycle, but in recent years from next year's 2026 to 2030 development cycle. So far, this is just a list of some of what staff have heard. There's the following major concerns, that being around the timeliness and level of detail that is provided for project information to make decisions around the tip, creating a space for any more focused or project level discussions instead of just high level summaries, including creating forms for project proponents to speak directly to their projects, and providing for better avenues for collaboration, not only between municipalities and the MPO, but municipalities, the MPO, state and regional stakeholders like MAPC and MassDOT, but also transit stakeholders as well that may also want to be involved in roadway projects for their improvements. So with that, that was a lot of information, I know. But on the next slide, I'm happy to field any questions that folks may have.
Mr. McQueen. Followed by AC.
Hold on.
1 minute for
Yeah,
Gross.
there we go. Ethan, thank you very much. You're amazing. If you could go back to the blue bikes slide that you had earlier. And then I'll also have a second comment on another item.
Pull this down and find it.
I'm sorry, what?
Sorry, I think it's the
It was
first.
it was a first or second slide, I think.
Didn't want to cause anyone to have vertigo from me flipping through everything.
I'm sorry.
I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
trying to find it, John. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Ethan, do you recall which slide?
Yeah, I can get the exact slide number for you. That would be slide number, I want to say 17.
Okay.
$17. God, you were really moving along.
And John, this is a condensed version. I'm going to say it's the abbreviated version. You should see what we get in the full board meeting. So.
Yeah, I know. It's also difficult to squint and read, even with magnifiers.
Yeah.
But
well, we could get you all the material.
No, I know. I just wanted to see this particular slide because I had a question kind of popped out at me.
Right.
It got eclipsed.
Totally.
Is that the one you were talking about? Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's the one. Boston Blue Bikes, 12 stations, $590,000. Then we see Brookline with 3 stations. Okay. And pedals. Okay. All right. I think I have answered my question. I had thought that the $590,000 was per bicycle station more than some of the others, but I don't think it is. So I retract the question. And my second item is the comment on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. And its readiness is just about ready to be sure to get the design funds at the May 6th town meeting. So we're going to be moving ahead on that so as with urgency to try and be in position for an earlier opportunity as it may arise. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, John. And Ms. Ragosa?
Sorry, I had to find my mute. No, I just was gonna echo John. I thought that was an amazing presentation, and I just wanted to ask, this is the first time I recall seeing that you do weight a project, depending on the year that the municipality last received funding. So is that new? Is that a new metric?
So that is a new metric that was incorporated as part of the project design pilot, but I should note that that figure is also incorporated within Appendix D of the TIP and has been for some years. So as a metric for scoring, it was new because MPO members indicated a preference for projects that hadn't had, I should say, for projects in communities that hadn't had a TIP project in quite some time. But the MPO has also been tracking that information for quite some time within Appendix D in order to try to identify and also really to help inform engagement strategies around where more projects should potentially try to be developed in those communities.
I think it's great. Thank you.
And I'll just add that part of the reason that we have emphasized communities that municipalities that haven't had a project recently is on the assumption that they are the ones that are having difficulties designing their projects. We do want geographic diversity anyways, but the main reason for doing the design pilot is to help communities that just don't have the resources to take it to that stage where they can design their projects and get to the threshold that we require for us to consider putting the project into the TIP universe. So with that, Ms. Osmond?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to reverse the my questions because one sort of was related to that. I was thinking back on, first of all, it was great and such a complete presentation. Thank you so much, Ethan. And I'm going to my notes to see. When there are delays or when there's so few major infrastructure projects, first of all, I just wanted to ask you, listing at 1.3 major infrastructure problems and projects. Is that a problem or is it a surprise? Is that typical?
I should clarify this. My language may have been a little bit confusing there. So yeah, the major infrastructure projects are an investment program. What I was actually trying to refer to, and the numbers are close, so I can understand why. There's the core investment programs, which really are the investment programs that often represent a minority of the projects, but a majority of the funding, at least of late. And those are the Complete Streets Investment Program, the Intersection Improvements Program, and the Transit Transformation and Bike PED programs altogether. That's because based on LRTP targets, that represents around about 70% of all of the funding that the MPO has, with 25% of the remaining being that major infrastructure program. Major infrastructure is its own investment program, of which there are 2 projects in there, but those have been on the TIP for some years. There's 2 new design projects in there. But really the greatest decline in application volumes that I was alluding to is happening in the core programs. I didn't include this slide in this presentation, but I do have a slide that I may have presented at the RTAC meeting maybe 2 months ago or so, probably before that, that really indicate how TIP applications have declined over time. And while nominally it doesn't seem as much because it will say, for example, that it's declined from 25 applications a year to this year we funded 32 new projects, so it doesn't really seem like it. If you actually subtract the Community Connections program by number from that, the application volumes have gone from about 19 or so projects in the 21 to 25 TIP to 3 this year. Last year it was about 8, the year before it was about 12. So in terms of where most of the money is, there's fewer projects that are looking for it. Was really kind of the point of what I was trying to get at there.
Okay, so my question, so I have 2 questions, but my question on that issue is this lower amount of projects, is it due to low staffing in certain towns or lack of political will to support them? And is there anything that like the MAPC could be doing or CTPS to like promote the ability of some of those cities and towns to put in applications?
Yeah, so I would note that this has been because this has been a multi-year trend, there's been action taking place for a couple of years now to try to really correct this. The design pilot represents the real first concerted effort to allocate financial resources directly to municipalities for that. That said, MPO staff and MAPC and other entities have been working with municipalities to try to help for some years now. It's just that the money seems to be one of the bottlenecks. I would add that most of the things that really are holding towns back in advancing projects in the first place to start designing are also the same prevailing reasons why readiness issues are taking place, as they're really interconnected there. And yeah, staff turnover at municipalities, COVID, I think, has been a boogeyman for like a lot of issues, but that is one of the ones where with a lot of retirements that took place during COVID, that has seen some of the greatest turnover, and therefore many projects have changed hands, paused, funding has been more difficult to come by, things of that nature have really come up.
Okay. And my other question was about that graph that showed LRTP, target LRTP versus tip spending. Is that like a lucky outcome, or is there some cause and effect, or did the LRTP appropriateness play into the decisions? And this graph helps confirm that that was done well? Or what do you take away from that?
Yeah, so again, as Len said, this is an abbreviated presentation. I would have normally put last year's chart to show this. This is actually not substantially different from last year. In fact, the biggest swing between last year was a reduction in the complete streets allocation and a slight increase in the proportion for major infrastructure. That increase in major infrastructure wasn't because of the new projects per se. It's only about $3 million worth of new design funding. It was actually in a decision by the MPO board to allocate more funding to existing infrastructure projects in nearer term years of the TIP, rather than later TIP years to fund more new projects potentially in the future. So again, to answer your question directly, it really is very similar to last year. I wouldn't say this is so much luck as we are adjusting the targets, and staff do try to solicit projects that reflect the goals set by the LRTP, especially because the most recent LRTP was adopted last summer, so it's pretty up to date. That said, though, because of the nature of all the overlap that can emerge between these investment programs, because the LRTP does not designate a certain allocation for unprogrammed funding, a little bit of difference is generally acceptable, so long as the projects still deliver the outcomes that residents and other stakeholders are looking for.
Is that it, Franny? And it looks like some microphones were
Yes,
muted.
yes,
So,
it
okay,
is.
great.
Thank you.
No problem. I mean, we'll get to talk a lot more about the TIP meeting in the next month. And I don't mean simply next month's meeting, but we need to pull together our comments on this TIP. So towards the end of this meeting, we'll be talking about when actually item number 7, is planning the 3 committee meetings. And so yeah, so we'll probably see Ethan again, if he's available to answer more questions and maybe give us some guidance, as to how to compose our comments, in a way that is effective, more effective. So with that, I'm going to move along. If you wanted to talk about UPWP studies, and how you all feel about them, to give me some guidance as to how to what to say, in the next UPWP meeting tomorrow. So once again, thanks to Ethan. And now Shaleka is here to help answer questions. She's not going to do a presentation. If you want to say anything, Shaleka, before we start talking, that's fine, but you don't have to. So give me a thumbs up if you want to say something. If I don't see a thumbs up,
No. I can just drop the link in this chat to the universe of proposed studies. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions.
So yeah, so we have that universe of TIP studies. I'm sorry, UPWP studies. as a member of the UPWP committee, I was sent a survey to rank them, and I did so. But that's me, and so I did not have the capacity to create a survey on my own to send to you all. But at the same time, I want to get as much input as you are willing to give. And I'll take that in any format. I mean, you can go through the sheet and rank things. I mean, all of them. You can give me your top 3 or top 5 or whatever. I mean, the meeting is tomorrow at 1 o'clock. If I could get your feedback by noon, that would be helpful. I can certainly look through it just before the meeting and maybe a little bit during the meeting. So it has to see what people here really care about. But this is time also for us to talk about that. And if you have questions about specific studies or the process, you can ask, and Sharika and or I will answer. So AC.
Yeah, not to beat a dead horse, but it's on this list. Is there going to be a study of accumulating info from the studies and having some sort of matrix as to how effective they were or what happened after? I know Franny's brought that up in the past.
So I think what you're asking for is like a before and after kind of.
Yes, what happened with the study? Like, was it
Yeah,
used on something, or how effective was it?
So we, as far as I remember in my time here, we haven't done such a work effort before. That's not something that is currently on our list of sort of proposed tasks for next year.
Great. But I know we have like a before and after study in progress, right? So like
there's a TIP before and after study in progress, but there hasn't been a UPWP one, as far as I know recently.
I think one way, I know this has come up before, and one way that I think we could maybe address it as well is having some more visibility for the advisory council as studies are progressing, and then as they wrap up, to let you all know like where the work is at, and then towards the end of studies, like how staff plans to incorporate them into ongoing work, because that's a big part of what we think about on the staff side as well. We also don't want like to just generate reports that sit on a shelf. So it's helpful to hear like from this group as well, how you think the results would be useful. So maybe one way we can address that, Len and I can talk more, but just, creating more touch points with you all as studies progress and as they conclude.
I've started pushing for a final report on projects that were funded quite a few years ago. And
Yes.
I think we did get a few, but not very many. And I still think that it's something that we really should get. Was the money well spent, or did it come out the way we expected? Are there changes in the project? I think we should know all those things.
So this is so you're talking a study about the TIP projects, or a study about the studies that we do for the UPWP?
Studies are done, and at the end of it, they should give us a report.
Yeah, we do. We get those.
Context of what we asked, what we gave them money for.
Yeah, well, we do get
not that big a deal.
Well, we do get the technical memos, which is the final report of the study. And this last year in particular, for the last couple of years, we have been having the presenters of those memos come and talk to the committee. So rather than me just giving a quick little update of what I heard in the MPO meeting, I've actually brought the people who did the study to talk to us about the memo. So usually it's like at least a half-hour presentation, so we see the results of the study in itself. I thought maybe the question was going a little further, meaning, okay, so you had the study, you got the results, what next? And I'm definitely interested in what next. And then I thought maybe your question was about, and this is something that I was asking about early on, and that is when we do a project that's meant to solve transportation project, do we then look after we've done the project? So let's say I'm just gonna pull something out. We do a major intersection project, and there are reasons for doing it. We then look at that intersection project later on to see what the effects were. And I thought we did have a before and after
No,
UPWP project in the mix. I know we do. It's just a matter of when. And so if I miss the results of that, which I'd be surprised about, then I have, and I'll go back and look at it. But for some reason, I think maybe it's gone. I need to go back and look. Anyways, so Skylar, does that address what you were discussing?
Well, yes, I guess what you're saying is that there are such reports, but I don't see them coming back to RTAC.
Yeah, well, and they're on the website. They're certainly in the agendas for various MPO meetings. But as I said, I've been having the folks come to the meetings, and partly, a large part is to meet the curiosity of my colleagues here on the council, but also it's more like I'm very interested in these studies, and I could ask 20 questions at an MPO board meeting about the studies, and I don't want to do that then. So I often say, please come to an MPO meeting, our RTAC meeting, so that we can talk about it some more. So I see John McQueen's hand, and then I'll go to Annette.
Yep. Hi, thanks. Yes, this is something we've been asking for, this kind of matrix, if you will, of what the results have been for various studies or projects that have been approved. Whatever happened to them, success, failure, we don't, it was indeterminate, whatever. And it comes under the banner of accountability. So I think it behooves us to, if not include it in the past, which we haven't, to any great degree or consistency, let's move forward with that matrix. I think that Anna Christina suggested it shouldn't be that difficult. There aren't that many approved UPWP projects that come out, and then we can have a great summary sheet when they all have ended in this coming fiscal year as to what happened, and it'll expedite any discussions on UPWP and performance. So I think that's something we ought to institute if it's not in the plans already. And it's not going to be that much difficulty to do it. Thank you.
Right. But I think there's a little, big distinction we want to make between UPWP studies and TIP projects. So studies often just,
specifically to Anna Christina's question, which I think was UPWP. I think that's each of those studies. How many studies are going to be fielded? 6, 10, something like that.
Or just how the information obtained was utilized, like who was it beneficial to?
Right. Okay. And then what happened to it? And
just saying something is on the web, you can go find it. That's not really an effective answer.
Right. We don't need to fish around for the answers. We should have it presented to us if we will be taking the time as we are now to opine on what should be fielded. Okay.
I want to go to that, and then I'll back up to this discussion. Annette?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify on the tip before after study that we have done a tip before after study. We are in the process of preparing that for presentation. So it should go to the board in probably May, June. It was a long time in the making, mainly because there were delays because of COVID and not being able to collect accurate data. And then we had some staff turnover as well. So it is almost there, and you will have access to that probably May or June.
Thank you, Annette, because I thought we had one in a study like that, and I just and I thought it was a little while ago. So but that's the project stuff. I hear you with respect to the UPWP study work. And we could. I want to say more, but I don't want to risk committing staff to something that it doesn't have the capacity to do now. So I need to talk with staff and see what can be done. And how far we go back and at what rate we go back. So
Ye-
John?
Yeah,
Yes.
those studies
Uh,
take, oh, I'm sorry.
No, Annette,
Yeah.
please, go ahead.
Those studies do take a lot of resources, and there is like a lapse time between when a study is funded and when it's actually built and when we have the after data. So there is a long lead time to be able to do those types of studies.
Yes, well, before my phone interrupted me, I wanted to say that things are available on the web is fine. But, you know, it puts a responsibility on those of us who want to know to go find it. And I think that when a project is listed, a final report of a project after construction is put together, then at least a link should be circulated.
John?
Yeah, similar to Skylar's comment. It's fine to have it up on the web. If it's ready to be published on the web, then it should be published and presented to us. Not, we don't have to fish for it. So I think if it's worth having done, it's worthy of presentation to us as a body to fulfill our mission.
Right. So what's being presented, like the results of the UPW study? Is that what you want presented? John McQueen?
I like the idea she had before about as it's going on and coming to completion, like where they're at, where they think it's gonna go to. Like even just knowing where it's gonna go to, that's what I was getting at. Just hearing towards the end, but it takes a long time, so.
Yeah, I mean, so that would have to be built into the work program. And normally they give us a timeline on a work program being, and there may be some check-in, with the board, before a study's done. That's usually to get some input as to how to move from one phase to another. But there's always a report that's generated, and it's usually presented, if not always, when there are projects for the MPO, to the board. And as I said, in the last year in particular, I think every study that has been presented to the board, I have to ask for a study for a full presentation really to be done to this committee. In fact, the presentations to the committee are as long and sometimes even longer than what takes place at the board level. So is that what you're wanting, John? Is it something else?
Well, I would like a matrix of excuse me, Skylar. A matrix for the PWP programs that are selected for a fiscal year.
Yeah.
To have more or less an executive summary to track them. What the study was, the date, what its method was, and then what were the results or the actionability or the actionability of the study. Did it accomplish anything new? Did we learn anything new? Or was it, no, kind of, we wish we hadn't done it?
Yeah, well,
and have it presented to us in a written form, even not a huge lengthy presentation, because it should be shorthanded.
All right. Well, the presentations are based on the technical memos, which are available. And if we need to put those links in the agenda for one of these meetings, happy to do that. I can't remember if they all come with executive summaries. They normally have something that summarizes them at some point in the survey. So my point is that what you want is there, and it'll be easy for us to get it to you, for me to get it to you. I just need to get it to you in a way that you feel as if you've really gotten it. I hesitate to say put it in a link, but
no,
but put it in a link someplace. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, at least have it as an action item for the UPWP to have that assembled, and whatever the final date is when all the UPWP studies have been completed, to have that as a summary form and presented to us as a written document, not for us to go fish for it on the web.
All right.
Exactly what I was trying to get across.
What was that, Skylar? I'm sorry, Scott, I missed
It's
that.
exactly what I was trying to get at.
Okay, so you two are on the same page, and I'm gonna do my best to get on the same page so I can give you what you want, and I think this though is kind of outside of the helping us decide what it is that we want to advise with respect to the selection of studies for the next UPWP. And so to the extent you want to give me some input on the next UPWP studies, I would appreciate that. And the link was included into the studies in the universe in the email that Stella sent. So have a look at that if you can, and get me as much input as you want, and by tomorrow at noon. Okay.
Yes.
And then I think what's going to happen too is we'll whittle down the universe feed, and then I'll have a sense of what the next steps are, and I can send you the info on what those next steps will be and what input you can help provide before the next time we have a UPWP meeting. It'll be one of these like one-way communication, so it's to stay within the bounds of open meeting law. All right. So we're gonna move on now because I think we have only like 12 minutes, and what I want to do is see what we want to do about the 3C committee. And so one of our missions is to comment on the tip. And so as Ethan pointed out, it'll go out for comment on the 22nd, and or at least the deadline for the comments is May 22nd. And our next meeting is May 8th. And so my inclination would be to have another meeting in a couple weeks, for us as a group to hash out that letter. And so it would just be another RTAC meeting, as opposed to trying to spin up a subcommittee. But everyone doesn't have to come, but it would just be advertised as a advisory council meeting, so they don't have to worry about anything within the bounds of OML. And whoever shows up gets to work on composing the letter, which will then present to the full council on our next meeting, which will be our next full meeting, which will be on the 8th. How do people feel about that? Let me put it this way: if there are any objections to that, let me know.
Are we allowed to meet informally?
Yeah, I can meet informally in anything that's under a quorum.
Okay.
Yeah. But you see, the deal was announcing a meeting, a full meeting, is that everyone doesn't have to show up, and the group can discuss the letter. We won't vote on anything, of course, but then we would then present our discussion, a draft of the letter, hopefully pretty close to final draft of the letter, to the full committee on the 8th, and then that would be submitted by the 22nd. And another alternative is that we do spin up a subcommittee. It determines its schedule. It would present something to the full committee, hopefully draft on the 8th, but then the full committee would have to convene again before the 22nd, to sign off on that draft. So I'm trying to accelerate the schedule, so that we can accomplish everything by the 8th, and then not have to have another meeting, after the 8th, in order for the full committee to sign off on it. And part of accelerations involves just opening up the process to the whole group, and then whoever's there participates in composing the letter.
I'm fine with that. I'm gonna have a really busy first week of May though, but I don't want to overpromise, but I'm gonna try.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I get that, and so this would be, I think, probably would aim for the 24th. So 2 weeks from now, we could, let's say, commit to an hour and a half, but maybe set the meeting for 2 hours just so that people can put aside that time if they can. We'll try and wrap up things in 90 minutes, and then depending on how far we get, will maybe affect what we have on the agenda for our full meeting on the 8th. Meaning that if I see that we might need some more time to work on it, I can block out some time on the May 8th meeting, for more.
Do you want to
more
do it
work.
as a lunch meeting? That might help as well. Like branch at 11:30 to 1 sort of area.
For the meeting on the
For the
24th?
meeting, does anyone have problems with that?
So the time that we have the meeting, I guess we're flexible as the time that we have the meeting. So I would say, normally I would ask who wants to be on the 3C committee. And so I can ask that question now. And those folks would be the one that determines the time of the meeting in which we can open up to everyone else. And so I'm hearing you, AC, saying that you want to be on that committee. You'd like the time to be in the lunchtime frame.
I think I've been on it in the past, and I think we met in the transportation building, but we don't have to now, but it was early. It was like a weird 2 o'clock, like 1 to 2 o'clock or something.
Yeah, well, I would say whatever time works, okay, Fran, I see that. I say whatever time works for people who want to be on the committee, who presumably will be doing most of the work.
I've been on the 3C committee for a long time.
So do you and AC have a preference as to when? And
No, I'm open to opening it up to the group and seeing who shows up.
no, well, I'll tell you this, I don't need to be a part of the committee. And I will say this too, and I'm fine with the meeting's gonna be if people want to meet in person. The odds that I will be able to meet in person are slim to none. But
Yeah,
I'm
me
fine.
too.
Yeah, okay, fine, so then if we're gonna do it remotely, it doesn't matter what time you do it, pretty much, I can try and make it work. So do you want to say the 24th? What, 11 to 12:30, 12 to 1:30? AC?
I like 12 to 1:30 because, normally if I have a meeting during the lunch hour, it's pushed. It's not a mandatory meeting.
Right,
It's usually a lunch and learn or something.
right, okay. So,
That's the
So-
8th?
no, that's the full committee. The full committee meeting is going to be
Oh,
at
full
its usual,
committee.
it's going to be at its usual time. We're not going to shift that one. So that one is the 2:30 to 4:15. This would be the April 24th meeting.
Oh, I thought it was gonna be earlier. I mean, I'll try for that. I'll pencil it in, but I like the idea that you had before earlier. What happened to the May 8th idea?
So we need to have a meeting where we draft a letter, and so that's
Yeah.
going to be the 24th meeting. Then we present that to the full committee on May 8th. So the May 8th is our usual.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got my
Yeah.
dates backwards. I was thinking in May 8th. Okay, was the date. Okay, my fault. Sorry.
No problem, no problem. So then, are you still available on the 24th? In 2 weeks from now?
I am looking and I am trying to decide that. I'm, like I said, pencil that in and send out the invite, and I'll probably put tentative, but I think I can. On a
So-
Thursday?
Yeah, okay, all right.
It's
On
likely.
Thursday? No, it's on a Wednesday.
Oh, it's on a Wednesday?
It's on a
No, that
Wednesday.
should still be okay, especially given the time. Thursdays I have a meeting, but it's at night, so that's fine. So I'm good. I'm good.
All right, so let me ask then, is noon to 1:30 as tentative for you as 2:30 to 4 o'clock?
Nope, that's fine too, if you want to do that.
Okay, well, let's stick with the 2:30, because I think generally people need, when it comes to these meetings, kind of have maybe the 2:30 framework. So if they are equally good for you, then let's go for 2:30 to 4 o'clock on the 24th. Right.
Yeah, actually, it's perfect. Perfect timing.
2:30, 4 o'clock on the
Yeah.
24th. Okay. All right, and whoever shows up, and then we'll compose away, and then I'll try and bring a little more outline to it since I've been really involved in the process. Earlier on, I said I prefer not to be involved because it's like I'm grading my own homework. And yeah, I will be grading my own homework, but I think I can be objective about it. But certainly, if a lot of people show up there and they're like, "Well, Glenn, we'll take it from here," I'll be okay with that. So I look forward to a lot of people showing up and saying, "We just don't need Glenn," and I won't even stay and listen. So okay, we have that settled. And next on the agenda, chair's report. It's been all tip all the time. And Ethan said, there were like 4 tipper meetings. He didn't say how long they were though. So they were quite the sessions. But this tip committee, the process engagement readiness committee, and came out of the when we developed the I want to say SOP, but it was the new operating plan for the MPO, and we said that we should be at least try out a new committee, an additional committee that would work on the tip to kind of supplement the work that's done by the full board. And I think it's really a good thing. And as Ethan has pointed out, and there have been some recurring problems, mainly around projects, the cost of projects increasing, and projects not being ready on time. And when they're not ready on time, it pushes them into a following year or two. But the longer they're delayed, the cost of the project goes up. If for another reason, then because of inflation, but usually delays result in increases in cost. We shouldn't have effect on what you can spend on that year. And as we've been to anticipate more and more stuff being pushed out, it becomes a case where you have very little to spend in any given year. So as Ethan pointed out, we have fewer and fewer projects each year that are being added to the universe. But another thing that goes along with that, though, it's not the cause of it, is that we don't have a whole lot to spend in any given out year. So this year we kind of struggled to fund the projects that we did. So we just have to work that all out. And I think this TIP committee is going to help us figure out a better way to handle that. One thing that is under preliminary discussion is that we talk with the proponents much more frequently in order to see how things are moving along on a year-to-year basis, as opposed to waiting 2 or 3 years after they're on the tip to then check in and see how they're going. So that's my quick chair's report. So we have a minute for old business, new business, and member items. You have anything? Let me go to participants view. I can see your hand. I'm not seeing any hands. So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn and say that we'll see each other, some of us on the 24th.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by AC Formosa, second.
Second.
Thank you, Owen. Second by Owen McDonald. And so with no objections, folks, we're adjourned again.
Bye, thank you.
Hopefully see a bunch of you on the 24th. Otherwise, see you on the 8th. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good weekend.